Welcome to the meeting of the Commission on Ethics and Public Lobbying in Government, newly revived and alive and kicking. We have a quorum, and I'll ask our Executive Director to do it, but we have a quorum here in Albany and in New York City. Executive Director Berlin.
Thank you, Chair Austin. This meeting is being held pursuant to notice and in accordance with provisions of the state's open meeting law and section 94 of the executive law. Both the meeting room we're using in the New York State Conference Center at 25 Beaver Street in Manhattan and the conference room at the Commission's offices at 540 Broadway in Albany are open to the public during public session. In addition, public session is live streamed, and the link can be found on the Commission's website at ethics.ny.gov. As Chair Austin noted, we have a quorum of commissioners attending in person, both here at the State Conference Center in Manhattan and at the Commission's office in Albany.
Thank you. Moving on to our first order of business, we have the approval of minutes. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes of the general meeting? Commissioner Karras?
On page 5, the second full paragraph on page 5, it says such as new is one word, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. This is the Public Information Office works on legislative. There's a word saying that.
Legislative matters.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, I have on page 6, under fiscal year 24-25 budget, the very last line of the first paragraph, and interruptions, and I'm not, I think that's just a typo. It should end, the sentence should end at outages.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Edwards moves and Commissioner James seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes as amended are accepted. Executive Director Berland's report.
Thank you. Before I go on to the operations report, let me note that Vice Chair Ayers and Commissioner Cardozo are both attending the meeting remotely pursuant to section 103-A of Public Offices Law and the Commission's rules and regulations for remote participation on account of Commission's attention to the operations report under tab V of the agenda book. As we have been doing for some time now, first column is the most recent month, in this case, most recent completed month, January 2025, the prior month, December 2024. And then we have comparable periods in the preceding year to date, and corresponding months, of course, are both the same at this time. First page is the investigations in enforcement data. You'll note that 11 tips, complaints, and referrals were received in January. No new investigations were open in January. One committee matter was closed prior commission meeting, and 7 COVID matters were closed. That is 172 pending matters and 51 investigations. So the net change is positive rate in total open and pending. Next page, page 2. Ethics, somewhat fewer inquiries and guidance requests in January as against December. Nonetheless, if you look at corresponding period, January 2024, we're continue to run 60% ahead of the previous guidance requests. So last year, 2024 closed roughly 60% of the number of guidance requests received in the preceding year. And again, we're continuing that trend. I will note that post-employment and outside activity requests continue to lead in terms of the number of inquiries that are coming in. Lobbying, page 3, the new biennial period began in January. In anticipation of that, the registrations started coming in December. We had almost 9,000 in December, and 6,600 more in January. The number of clients is over 7,000, approaching 8,000 now coming in. And if you add the statistics up, we did count recently, since the commencement of biennial registration period, we've received in excess of 26,000 clients. So that's registrations by monthly reports that came in January and client semi-annual reports plus amendments to those. The volume is robust, to say the least. Next page, financial closure reports. And that's on page 4. You'll see that as previously discussed, almost 2,500 failure to file notices were issued in 2024. None were issued in January. The number, as of the date of the report, the number of outstanding filings out of that nearly 2,500 is now down to 127. No delinquencies were issued. Last year, we received a fair number of exemption and deletion requests. We received another 5 in January, so they continue to come in. Melinda, anything to add?
Good morning, Commissioners. What I would like to add in wrapping up the failed to files that were issued in December, from the time I did the report on February 6th, there were 127 outstanding from over the 2,000 issued in December. 54 more complied with the filing. And between yesterday and today, there are 73 outstanding that I have issued notices of delinquency to. Staff and I did 2 months of outreach to gain compliance, and they still were not filing. So we have moved forward with the next steps of enforcement with a notice of delinquency that's public record, and their names will be posted on our website within the week. Also, wrapping up the 2023 filing, I did do a round of failed to files this month in which I issued 327. Over half have already complied with the filing within the 15 days, which was yesterday. My staff will start outreach today on the 152 that remain.
Melinda, thank you. And I should say, Melinda is our Deputy Director of Financial Disclosure Statements. Any questions?
Andy?
Yeah. Commissioner.
In footnote 6, I see that 40 were remaining from those who were supposed to file by May 15th, or they were new hires. Do we know what percentage of those are new hires?
The notices of delinquency that were issued?
41 remaining outstanding in footnote 6.
Okay, the ones that are outstanding are, out of the number that were issued notices of delinquency between yesterday and today, 71 of them are academic filers that were required to file by November 15th. The other 2 that were issued notices of delinquency were required to file within 30 days of commencing qualifying appointment.
Do we have a breakdown? The net was 41. At least this.
We're looking at footnote 6. There were 41 outstanding from last year.
Oh, the 41 that were outstanding, Those were individuals that were due by May 15th or within 30 days of commencing qualifying appointment. Those were individuals that were issued failed to files in June. And
I understand. My question is, what percentage of those are new hires as opposed to those who had not filed?
that I'm not sure. I would have to go back and look. That I don't have that information.
Well, thank you, Belinda. We'll get the breakdown for you.
Any other questions? All right, continue.
Training, page 5. We are continuing to report trainings conducted by our own training staff, admissions training staff, live trainings received at the agency level. That is among the 380 plus agencies within the executive branch, as well as numbers of employees who are using the on-demand CETC. That's available on SLMS and increasingly on other platforms. I would say that we're continuing to work. We're in the process of undertaking a procurement to enable us to expand the number of platforms on which the on-demand CETC can be made available. Agency websites and on other platforms. Right now, we're reaching something in excess of half the workforce through the SLMS system. Various agencies and campuses have their own SLMS systems, but many agencies lie outside the sphere of the SLMS system, which is operated by the Office of Employee Relations. And we need to make the CETC on demand available for more of them. You'll see that the total in January, and this is a dynamic figure, there's a substantial reporting lag still, notwithstanding the automation we put in place. There's still a fair amount of manual reporting and uploading that agencies are doing to get the data into the system. We have just under 8,200 total trainings taking place in January. Bear in mind, and that's on demand plus live training. Bear in mind, our target is to have every member of the executive workforce receive both required trainings, complete a full cycle of the primary CETC and refresher training by the end of this year. If you total that out against the workforce of approximately 330,000 employees, that means by the end of this year, 660,000 trainings need to have been completed since the inception of the training requirement. We ended 2024 with something in excess of 345,000. So we have a way to go in achieving our goal. Calculation is we need to see something in excess of 27,000 combined on-demand and live trainings taking place this year. I said before that's a challenge. And the training team, the education group, and the ethics division will be focusing very closely on managing that, and developing these, measuring the extent to which the training objective is a realistic one. It's only January. The numbers are preliminary. So the 8,200 will inevitably grow. And see what we look like in February.
Question here. Are there more in the slow months?
As the Penny team has explained in the past, in summer months, our team targets student campuses because of greater availability, teachers and other academic affiliates in that time period. So we increase outreach to them. But in terms of the programming that we provide, remember, we're still building staff. It's aimed at being continuous throughout the year. We're a backstop. Nonetheless, our group is doing a substantial number of trainings. We plan to do more and more through the years. At the agency levels, we know around holidays, of course, to some extent. And there may be other priorities. At this point, we can take a closer look at the data and see if there are bumps at the agency level.
Please.
In trainings that they do. Any other questions? Next, page 6, audit and review. As I explained, and as Gareth Perrin, Deputy Director for Compliance Audit and Review, has previously explained, we are moving forward, completed the targeted FDS review. So a total of 990 were completed in 2024. That's a large number. 2024 is an election year, so we have not only incumbents in the legislature statewide, elected positions, but also candidates, both in the general election and the primary election, who are required to file financial disclosure statements. These filings are subject to targeting. That process has been completed, and now the focus is on random FDS. 66 of those in 2024. The cycle continues through the 14th of 2025. So the objective is to get that number up into the 800 or 900 or 1,000 range of that cycle. And then random lobbying audits will continue at the same level as before. Last year, we completed 861 and 700 in the previous year in 2023. But we're moving apace. Any questions? Public Information Office. See a lot more information on this page. Up to now, we've been reporting on records access requests, FOIL requests coming through your office. Numbers produced, and those numbers remain robust. Requests received in January 13, responded to 836 pages of documents. We have 10 pending, all within the permissible time. Emily DeSantis, who is our Director of Public Information, Communications, and many other things. Her group. That's an enormous amount of energy in pushing out information across the breadth of the agency, covering essentially every unit and division, assisting them in getting out their communications, as well as providing posts, responding to information requests, dealing with press, media generally, in public inquiries. So you'll see that there's quite a bit of activity January. January is a typical month. The group is exceedingly busy. Emily, anything you want to add or explain about the new format?
No, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You have a question? Emily, on the second line, records provided, the monthly count in the middle shows 10 requests and 72,815 pages. And in the last column of that same line, it's 728 pages. So I'm assuming one of those numbers is a typo.
Yeah, we can go back and make sure it's correct.
Oh. Yeah,
728 or 72,000.
the five-digit number is a typo. The last two numbers should be removed. That's my fault.
No, what I'm saying is that
It's 15 was.
Yeah, 728 is the correct number.
Yeah.
that's it. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Budget update?
Budget updates is under tab C. We are progressing previously. We counted for housing comparatively modest surplus. There are a number of, for example, procurement we're doing to have the CETC on-demand course made adaptable for use on multiple platforms. This procurement we'll be doing before the end of the year. That will consume additional NPS, non-personal service costs. But at the burn rate we're running at, you'll see this on the second, at the foot of the second chart. We have something over 700,000 potential surplus this year. That's largely the result of the hiring we've experienced over the past year. We talked about before, it has been a challenge in a number of divisions, including our hiring. So we've had an excess, a temporary excess in personal services appropriation. That will all vanish in the coming year. As you know, the governor's proposed appropriation of the agency is flat, except for an increment of about $250,000 that appears to be earmarked to pay some residual expenses carried over from the prior agency. Equal services. The net of that, it's a flat budget. That leaves us with something, the whole, both with respect to non-personal services, the appropriation has been flat for several years now, even though our costs continue to rise, even if we had additional procurements. We have escalation clauses in our leases, as well as other contractual costs like audits. Outside audit costs, mandatory audit costs, they have increased over time. We have been in discussions with both DOB and the executive chamber over that. And now that we have the decision in the Cuomo case, expecting that those discussions will accelerate. I did submit written testimony to the joint legislative hearing. All of you were provided copies of that, making the case, explaining why we have not been able up to now to use the full appropriation on the personal services side, and why we need that cash to we capped in appropriation to move forward with a expanded staffing plan and with meeting our statutory obligations. And that legislative budget process is going to take some number of months to play out.
Do you expect that interest in working for us will now be more robust after the Cuomo decision?
I expect so, and it's probably not just the Cuomo decision, there are probably some other things that are very outside of the commission that spike interest. Lots of people who are interested in working in public service, who eventually have qualifications we need. So we are anticipating will be increased interest. And now that what some may have regarded as a cloud has been lifted, we do anticipate increased interest. The other side of the challenge is to get the budget aligned with our needs. That process hopefully will work in our favor. I should add that in addition to outreach to the chamber and to the division of budget, we are also meeting with the appropriate legislative chairs. Discuss both legislative initiatives that the division has on the budgetary situation.
Any other questions? Mr. Harris?
Just for my understanding, we're at the top where it says contractual services, special services, non-personal services, and under non-personal contractual services. And our original appropriation was 742,000. Our adjusted appropriation was 300,000, but our disbursements is 658,000. Is that based on the original appropriation? And is that money that was going over from contractual services to personal services? I just didn't understand how we dispersed
Yes,
$658,000 if our adjusted appropriation was 300.
no, we moved,
Okay,
that's something we do with division of budget.
okay.
That's a process.
I just wanted to understand the number.
If you look at the adjusted appropriation for the year, several of the items are not, have not been expended at all. So net, we're ahead of the game.
Okay.
Commissioner James?
Yeah, we're 740,000, so my projected, we still have, so, full 2 months.
I think you had talked about, your request either to the executive chamber or to the DOB, to let us use this year's surplus for that, the expenditures required next year. The increase they were giving us, I guess is for past work of JCO. Were those talks?
Correct.
Pull it off?
Yeah, we've been working to get that off our books. It kind of carried over. We started out with the JCO budget when the transition took place in July of 2022. I'm going to carry along with some of their obligations. Some challenges with having OSC approve those now that we're beyond that fiscal year, 2022 fiscal year. There are otherwise budgetary restrictions. I think under existing protocols, you can't use more than 1%. Or 0.5%. In current appropriation, have some obligations. The limitation on that. Unless it's special legislation, the governor's proposed budget to get that off our books is adding that amount to what they deem to be the appropriate appropriation. It's kind of a technicality, but otherwise it would have carried along at that figure. And then there's some other pots that are out there to pay litigation expenses we are drawing off that, so we'll reduce that amount. But it would have been a 40,000 year after year. Get off the books if you do it in one shot. But we need the money for other things, particularly for personnel.
Hopefully more commissioners. Are there any other questions? Okay. Reporting update. I'm sorry, Commissioner Per Diems.
These are in the book. They will be posted. So we'll not read them into the record, except for the year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date total for Commissioner per diems, which also includes the retroactive adjustment back to April of 2024. Commissioners per diems are based upon salaries paid to Supreme Court justices. These salaries will increase April 1, 2024. Commission amended the resolution to incorporate that increase. So those retroactive catch-up back to April 1st and running through the end of 2024 is included in the amount. But fiscal year-to-date total inclusive of that is $205,051.51. Not on the chart is diem retroactive reimbursement to former Commissioner Davey, Chair Davey, will be receiving, but has not yet received, $479.98. A retroactive adjustment.
Any questions? Recruiting update.
And we are continuing to recruit. We're mindful of our current budgetary predicament. We're trying to stay within the guardrails of that. We'll work to get the appropriation improved. We have a new trainer coming in tomorrow. We'll introduce her at the next commission meeting. We have accepted offer now outstanding for new filing examiner in the lobby, when badly needed. Fine for us. Circumstances came together. That will take some time to process through the usual channels as well as background searches. So those two positions are being filled. We also have important vacancies in investigation, enforcement division, and in the lobbying room, as we discussed before, training assistants, and the education group. Several of them. At this point, we're at 9 or 10 vacancies. We can't fill all of them with the votes of the population. And we're working on making adjustments.
That's subject to the conversations we're still having with DOB.
We have preliminary conversations with both DOB and the chamber. The understanding was that we would follow up once we have the decision. And once we have that decision now. So I've reached out again, expect to have further conversations.
Commissioner Edwards?
Did you say that you're still filling the education position with the temp?
We're trying to bring in permanent workers, but yeah, we do not yet have a temp. We're having people from the administrative unit help out.
Do you have any candidates for that position?
We have resumes. I'll say that, but we don't have any interviews currently scheduled at this point. But the postings are out. And again, hopefully there'll be increased interest in those positions. We've improved the grading of them, so we're hoping that will make them attractive.
Just concerned with the volume of training that has to take place in 2025, that position be filled.
Yeah, I mean, these are the administrative positions, and they're not training positions. They do support training, and they're critical because in the current situation, trainers are spending more time straight than we would like them to. Nonetheless, they have been able to conduct a really impressive number of trainings over the past year. We expect that to continue.
I agree, it has been impressive, but you just expressed your concern about reaching the 2025 goals. And I'm just concerned that those positions, not filling those positions puts even greater hardship on the training staff. That should be one, and I agree, it should be one of your priorities.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, and we talked about that before, one of the models we talked about it a little bit in the later meeting. There may be a different model that will turn out to be necessary in terms of how trainings are done. The vast bulk of training is being done in the live training at the agency level. It's 384 agencies. So, the vast majority of that training. The on-demand is taking up, as you saw in last year's statistics, about half, almost exactly half, 70,000. So training. But the balance of it was largely done at the agency level.
But that too is problematic. We looked at the law report, the feedback that these agents at the agency level, they don't have the funding, the staff appropriately to respond to the demand. So that, that's also impacted our numbers.
It is absolutely impactful. It's something we have to look at. It's not on our budget, it's on their budgets. And so we're talking about not just one out of the 384 agencies budgets. We're talking about the other 383 as well.
So would that require some sort of legislative fix so that those agencies get money
Well,
for this?
I mean, I think that's going to be something that we want to look at. How to deal with it. Legislation that created that requirement did not provide funding for any agency other than something, but, you know, traditionally, admittedly, a much smaller requirement was handled. Working at the agency level, where some training materials, protocols, standards provided by the former agency. Comparative training. So it's a major change. You know, remarkably, we got halfway there. Now the question is, can we get over the finish line? What we have. And having the administrative assistant positions filled, I don't know, to us, but it's not gonna, it's not gonna make or break the situation.
It just feels when I hear from you and I hear from staff with regarding to the demand and the numbers that we have to achieve to meet to meet this statute. It just feels like there isn't that the training. Wake up. It's not a good fit. It's not an appropriate demand, either at our level and at the agency level, based on what we're seeing coming in.
We have to take a closer look at it. I mean, there are other training mandates out there. Ours is not the only training mandate. So there's harassment training that needs to be conducted. There's adequately OER, driven SOMS trainings that are taken. So there are means and capabilities that are out there. This is additive to that, to the extent that ECRA expanded the scope of ethics training beyond policy makers. Others who had to take that, and threshold ones who had to take that kind of training. But you know, the purpose of this 3-year plan that we're completing is to see what works, what doesn't, what adjustments can be made, and what recommendations we're going to have. With respect to the training model, with respect to the frequency of training, with respect to the scope of training. So it's a large issue with a number of moving parts, but there are paradigms.
I think it would be fair to say that, you know, we've been kind of working like the one-armed powder hanger for the last year or so with the number of commissioners and staff. With the cloud over our head, my assumption would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that cloud is going to dissipate rather quickly, and we're going to be able to go forward better armed, better staffed, and better numbers of maybe even the required number of commissioners. That'd be nice. Anything else? Okay. Executive Law 1, Section 1D review, updated status.
Attachment E in the agenda book contains the strategic comprehensive review plan that staff has put together. Express special recognition to Emily and Yvonne, Deputy General Counsel, for coordinating the effort to put this plan together. I should say it has 2 components. We are at the point in the comprehensive review process that in the approved plan, it's called diagnostic. So we have put the inquiry out, compatibility of statutes and regulations amongst themselves, the effective scheme of bringing about ethics and lobbying compliance and enforcement. 2 public hearings, we had roundtable. Commissioners were given really comprehensive master class of the ethics advisory opinions, several ethics advisory opinions, we need some recommendations, or some maybe needs to be revisited. We've had the presentation last year, the two surveys that were conducted, one on the ethics side, one on the law side. So we've gathered a lot of information. And now the onus is on staff in each of the divisions to take an inward look, informed by the information gleaned from those processes. There's an amount of information that's come from it. But take an inward look at what's working, what isn't, what could be improved, what maybe can be left alone, what we're doing that maybe we don't need to do. That's successive. Now generally, to make what we do more effective and more efficient. And better aligned with the overall mission. Bring about ethics and public compliance. Generally improve. Trust the government is working for the public, not for government. Well, we're moving forward in that process. Emily, Vita, and leadership, staff leadership generally across the agency has taken information that has come out of the two surveys, and they put together a plan to begin implementing changes, many having to do with better communication, improved training, improved materials, and generally pushing out more and more information about the agency and inviting in more and more inquiry and providing better guidance overall to the communities that we serve and have developed. And that's in the appendix to the strategic plan. Are there any questions?
Questions. First, in terms of understanding what we just said, you mentioned there are two components. The first one is diagnostic. What's the second component?
That's the second phase, is diagnostic.
What's the first phase?
The first phase was developing general background and educating commissioners in general about the work of the commission. And the third phase is remedial. And that's and that essentially means taking what the recommendations that we have from staff and commissioners and moving them into a model. So this will changes.
Okay, thank you.
That's a process we haven't figured out yet. Finish the assessment and you know the expectation. We've given some examples of the kinds of takeaways that may come out of the diagnostic phase. We're moving into the remedial, and this is actually a truncated list. Emily and Kavita very wisely suggested that these are just examples of things that the staff might be proposing to commissioners and to the wider communities. We have to develop. We don't have the process in place. We have ideas for it, for how we roll out our remedial proposals. But first, we have to develop them. So that's the phase we're in.
I think it answers my questions on what I didn't understand. I read it, it was very well done. I appreciate the work that was involved putting it together. I was wondering whether or not I would see more specific recommendations coming from the education unit. Looking at, again, the above report, there are a lot of valid points that they made with regarding areas we might want to look at pursuing, but what you're telling me that would come in the remedial stage.
Well, I should say, and they will. The bigger substantive ideas will come then, but in terms of much of what came out of the vault, particularly with respect to training, but really across the breadth of the agency, if you look at the appendix, these are immediate steps.
Yeah, but there aren't a lot attributed to the education. You know, so I read that, which is fine. I think I'm fine with the fact that you're telling me that'll be much more specific in the remedial thing. Cause it just seems to me that the report was rich.
If I
The
may,
survey
um,
the survey was rich.
Commissioner Edwards, so, on page 20, it's labeled
wait.
training, but that,
Yeah, it's appendix A, but just a moment, Evelyn.
I was just saying that the report was rich with, it became that survey regarding what was clear and not clear, and how training could be improved. And I was looking for that. But based on.
right, so that starts on page 20, Commissioner Edwards.
Let Commissioner Edwards finish your comments.
Based on the components that you've laid out for this review, we can expect that in the third, we can expect that during the remediation.
Emily?
Now,
Yeah, so Commissioner Edwards, what you're referring to, the summary of, the survey findings is earlier in this document, and then the response to the survey for education and training starts on page 20. And this is, the survey response related to communications and clarifying training requirements. So this has if you go to, the tactics part on page 21, this has the tactics that we're going to use to address the survey findings related to education. Similarly, there's an ethics component, which also kind of overlaps with some of the things in education. And that addresses how we're going to address the ethics findings to make materials more clear. So that
I reviewed that. The way you outlined your thoughts.
These are the survey response plans to the survey. The next step that we're going to do is the remedial assessment, where every unit's going to take an internal look to develop a comprehensive strategic plan that'll look similar to this, but it'll be much more focused on other things like operations, regulations, laws, and other things that the processes that the agency goes through. So this is our survey response plan, and the next one is more of an operational.
I was just I looked at page 20, 21. I look at those two pages, and it looks like education was assigned number 3, and most of your tactics were number 3. So I was questioning where was the educational piece, but again, what I think I hear you saying is to come in the next phase.
Well, this is a lot of it right here. So page 21 actually through 23, all, and then right through the end of 25, this is all the education and training unit working in conjunction with communications and ethics. So this is all 12 tactics will involve education in this plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any, Commissioner James?
Well, I also want to commend Vita and Emily and the rest of the staff on putting together. Just curious as to, I feel the timeline. Are we on schedule with our timeline?
We are.
Yes, we have started. The things in December have been complete. The things in January and February, we've started and are working on. So as of now, we are.
Great.
Yeah, and I should say, and I congratulate Emily, Anita, everybody who worked on this as well. So the goal of this part of it is to maximize what we now have. And get the maximum utility out of sources we have. And it's really across the agency. It will have an impact on training, we believe. It will have an impact on ethics, and it will have an impact on compliance. And it will help immeasurably in assessing the next phase. What more needs to be done? What can be accomplished? Well, I think it's pushing the limit. It's going to be a huge amount of work. I should say this is I understand, this is a huge amount of work on top of a huge amount of work. When you don't have all the employees you would like to have run the agency. Should be. So there's a lot that has to happen, but this is happening now. And it's critical, so
And I
we're,
just want to,
go ahead.
I just want to add too, the next phase is also going to be, there'll be an aspirational component, right? We'll be looking at things where, we will need, changes to laws, regulations, and increased staffing to achieve, as well as, getting some technology to help us do some tasks. So with every, proposal that we have in the next phase, we're also going to delineate exactly what we need to get there, which can help inform, for instance, our legislative agenda, regulations changes, our budget ask in the coming years.
Yes, are there any other questions? Comments? All right, let's move forward. Okay, we're up to the chair's report. Needless to say, it's a pleasure to see you all. This past couple of weeks have been very difficult for health reasons, and the like. Committee meetings had to be postponed, unfortunately, because of it. None of our committees would have had a quorum based upon those who could not attend due to illness. So for those of you who, for whatever reason, could not attend by that reason, I hope you're all feeling better, since now we've got to roll up our sleeves and we've got some work to do, thanks to the Court of Appeals. We've basically been operating with if this or if that occurs, then we can do this or we can do that. And it was very much a matter of limbo to a greater or lesser extent. Obviously, the questions as to constitutionality and the like, notwithstanding the numbers of judges voting which way, has ultimately fallen in favor of this commission continuing its work in all respects that were objected to by the plaintiffs in the Cuomo matter. So we now really have to redouble our efforts to be as thorough and not thorough as much because we have been, but as all encompassing with the responsibilities that we have. And we can't rely on the fact that there is a lawsuit pending because now there isn't. In that regard, I've noted that we need to prioritize the cases that need to be heard and prosecuted. Get rid of the cases that are analyzed and get rid of the cases that are stale, non-prima facie, or otherwise prosecutable for whatever reason now, so that we can focus on that which we've either been adjourning because of the litigation, that was stayed because of the litigation, or otherwise we just couldn't do. Now is the time to do an almost spring cleaning and get us to the point of being able to investigate and enforce the rules without any limitations. We really need, and I will be speaking with Sandy with regard to the fact that we need now to push those who are able to appoint a member of the commission and have not yet or have not fully nominated those who would fill their quotas with regard to what they're entitled to in the according to the statute at ECRA. So I with Sandy and I will discuss that. My thought would be sending a letter to each of the chairs, the individual members of the executive and legislative branches who have not yet either filled their positions, have completely filled their positions, or otherwise, so that we can go forward as a full commission of 11. We can be a little more comfortable in making quotas, quorums, so that we can do our business and not have to worry that if one person or two people are ill, that we can't do anything to set because of the open meetings law. So it's really going to be important for us to focus on getting things done. We have done, and I applaud all of you, staff and commissioners, for getting as much done and accomplished as we have. All right, since we were disconnected, I'm going to just perhaps repeat myself a little bit. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Now that we are moving forward, we need to prioritize our cases, work our docket as vigorously as possible, and bring to resolution all of our open cases, and schedule those that need to be heard and move forward. We certainly need to press our legislative leaders to give us the names of the commissioners they want to appoint, if they haven't already, so that we can move forward with a full complement of 11. This group with 8 has done an amazing job helping to make sure we have quorums, helping to make sure that our committees are working, and it's really been a credit to the staff and our members that we have really been able to do as much as we can with 8. It's going to be amazing to see what we can do with 11. Otherwise, I think I mentioned hearing examiners. We will need hearing examiners for our hearings, and if anybody, any commissioner knows anybody they can recommend, get their resume and submit it to us so that we can start working forward in that regard.
They have to be lawyers.
Have to be lawyers. That's a good question.
The answer is yes, in the past we've required.
Otherwise, May 15 is our deadline with regard to FDS filings by the commissioners. Are we okay on the recusal filings?
Yes.
What's the date?
May 15 is our deadline for filing our FDSs. I am told there will be a link sent to commissioners with our prior filed FDS so that we can use that as the template for updating that information.
And I believe that notice will go out on or about April 15th.
Okay. So at that point, you'll have a month, but I'm going to remind you in March and April again anyway. So that way we're all on top of it and doing what we can do. Okay, that's basically all I had. Thank you to Kavita and Emily for that amazing and thorough report that we just reviewed. And again, thank you to the staff for keeping us afloat and moving forward in these very difficult times. Let's look forward to better times ahead and accomplishing what we're here to accomplish in every respect. And with that, since we did not have committees meet due to health issues and they were all scheduled, there will be meetings scheduled for the legislative, administrative, and education, legislative, investigation and enforcement, and administration committees over the next week or two, so that we will be prepared to discuss some of the issues that have been referred to those committees at the last meeting. And with that, I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law 105 and Executive Law 94 sub 11 to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending matters concerning, pending litigation and investigative and enforcement matters that are confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law.
So moved.
Commissioner Karas moves. Commissioner Cardozo seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Commissioner Groenewegen, you're opposed to going to executive session, or you were just responding?
No, I both voted aye and raised my hand.
Oh, okay. Everybody approves. And then we'll go to executive session. All right, we are back. We're in public session, and I call upon our executive director to give a summary of the executive session meeting.
Chair Austin, thank you. In executive session, the commission discussed matters related to litigation and legal advice. The commission discussed steps in 2 investigative matters, closed 8 matters, all of them closed matters, and discussed several other investigative matters. Thank you.
Thank you. We move now to item 7 on the agenda, notice of emergency and proposed rulemaking to amend 19 NYCRR section 943.3S. I'll entertain a motion to grant that, to adopt that recommendation and issue those notices. So moved by Commissioner Edwards, seconded by Commissioner Karas. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Item 8, training waiver and modification standards and process discussion.
I'll be speaking about that.
Please.
So we wanted to bring this to the commission's attention because it's an issue that's arisen, and staff doesn't really have direction at this point. Our enabling statute, the Executive Law 94-8A, provides for allows the commission to make an exception for the training requirement for anyone who's related. And it's phrased in the context of a negative, unless the commission grants an extension or waiver for good cause shown. So in other words, if someone shows good cause, the commission has the power to waive their training requirement or modify it. So as you can see, the statute doesn't provide a whole lot of guidance. We have gotten a couple of requests now that are pending. They provide generally the same types of arguments, and we can go into that maybe at another time. But at this time, I think we are looking for guidance on. Oh, I should mention also that Resolution 2302 does not cover the situation, so staff doesn't have the authority to take action on our own. So we're looking for direction from the commission, and maybe the commission can decide how it wants to approach these types of requests.
Can you describe the nature of the request?
Well, there are a total of 4 requests. One is a joint request from 3 medical facilities, 3 hospitals. And the 4th one is from the Javits Convention Center.
What's the asserted good?
The request is for, the Javits is looking for a waiver. The medical facilities are looking for a waiver and or modification.
permanently?
And what's the good, what's their good cause or?
Generally, the medical facilities talk about the difficulty of having clinical staff attend a training session either within their 12-hour shift, which would take them away from patient care, or outside their 12-hour shift, which would require a lot of overtime and require them to be at work for a substantial number of hours. And they also cite budgetary reasons. In other words, they would have to pay all this clinical staff overtime for just sit for the training. And Javits made more or less the same arguments, except they also they're dealing with employees who are highly seasonal and only work maybe a handful of days or a handful of weekends per year. And they may not have access to notebook computers. And they also have difficulty, scheduling this, getting them time that they don't necessarily work during business hours. And they also talk about the expense of having to pay these employees overtime to sit for the training.
Let me just say, what staff is looking for now is really procedural guidance. Ultimately, what they need is delegation. We're not asking the commission in the context of a formal commission meeting to adjudicate these requests, because there's a lot more that we would need to present and talk about in that context. Every agency, as we've discussed, has challenges, both in terms of carving. There's nobody working for the state who was characterized as having free time for training. Every agency has to, and it's not just our training, it's all of the other training that is the state requirements. They have to go have time to do it, schedules, come up with resources for doing it. But we're thinking in some instances, exigent situations, we're really reluctant to even think about dispensing with any ethics training whatsoever. It's hard to think of what kind of position an individual might have some kind of conflict of interest in the course of the work careers of the state. But we'd like to have procedural mechanism that we could administer in passing on basic guidance and guidelines and standards that we could pass along to applicants and set up a procedure where we would make determinations or recommendations after first having discussions with agencies. Separately, we're talking about alternative modalities for delivering ethics training too, which will require a lot of evaluations. There are lots of things potentially on the table. But first, we'd like to have authority for one procedure that we could apply. Sure. These kinds of things.
How frequently do these applications come in?
Sorry?
How frequently do the applications come in?
Not frequent.
And is there any prior experience in dealing with those kinds of applications?
I don't think so. To my, Jacob had a much smaller training requirement that was basically limited to financial disclosure filers, and I don't believe anyone ever applied. The statute contained the same provision, but to my knowledge, no one applied.
It was trying refresher training basically after an initial comprehensive training. So it wasn't present to the extent, and there are instances, no doubt, where without asking for an exemption or an adjustment, trade is just not taking place. So the issue may actually be broader than the handful of requests that have come in.
Okay. All right, so it's James's hand, then Commissioner Edwards, and then Commissioner Ayers.
So I think it would be rather difficult for us to come up with a procedure today. It seems to me that we're just hearing about this. I'd like to hear some recommendations from staff as to what they think would be appropriate way first. Make a decision or kind of what you made.
Well, if I understand correctly, staff is asking for permission to do it.
To look into it.
To look
might
into it,
pop
so-
up.
Oh, that's what we're asking for. That's what we're asking us for permission to make the decision.
For them to do it.
No.
Well, I mean, I guess that would be one approach, but we're just asking for general guidance from the commission and how we would like to proceed with these types of requests. So right now, the ball is in the commissioner's court.
I don't have.
You're on the list.
Thank you.
Be comfortable with staff making that decision, provided that there's consensus around the framework from which you'd be operating. So, for example, I kind of agree with Executive Director with regards, it's very rare. The requests that they're making are based on criteria that's set for most agencies. If we say yes to that,
That's right.
how do we say
No,
no to anyone else? So I would think it'd be very rare. The issue of, seasonal workers working a couple hours, maybe that's something, but I think that as long as there's understanding that there'd be limited situations where this would be approved, then I think I'm comfortable with the staff moving forward on that. Having this discretion to do that. I guess bringing back to us those rare occasions where there should be an exception to the rule. We understand the dilemma of not having the funding to do it. But that's the big picture that we talked about that today. And perhaps we can advocate for the need for funding for that. But to allow them to be exempt because of it makes no sense to me.
Vice Chair Ayers?
Thanks. Yeah, echoing what others have said. I mean, I definitely think staff should be making these decisions. It seems like in the enforcement context, staff decides when to grant an extension of time to reply. Is New York City still there? You just disappeared.
We're here.
We're here.
Okay, great. Seems like, anyway, I was saying in other contexts, staff decides whether to grant an extension, of lobbying paperwork. My sense is staff decides those things, and that's very appropriate. I do think that to the extent staff would find it helpful for us to opine on general policy about how to grant these extensions, sure, but then I think, like others, I would want staff's judgment. I mean, I think I share the reaction everybody else is having here, which is like, if the only way you can get staff to do this is by paying them overtime, then that sounds like a management problem to me. It sounds like you've routinized overtime to such an extent that you can't take a minute to train your employees on things that they need to know. Like that doesn't sound like a very persuasive request to me personally, but I guess my thought is, to the extent that requests come in and they present sort of repeating issues, it's not just like one person who was in the hospital and missed their deadline and then you have to grant something to that person. But if it's a categorical question about seasonal employees or something, if staff wants the commission's guidance, I think that's fine, and I'd be happy to do that. But my inclination would be, I think, to propose amending our resolution that governs delegation of issues to staff so that this issue is among those that are delegated. And if that's acceptable to others, then I guess I would ask staff to come back with a proposal to do that.
We can do
Just
that.
John.
One of the things, Keith, I think one of the things that we have to do is recognize what kind of criteria we might want to have considered. In just talking about it, I've written down the number of hours that the employee works, financial burden, the need for an ethics training in the particular area, and collateral impact on the function of their duties would be things that I would want to know. And of course, we need a procedure for accomplishing that kind of review. So those would be the things Keith?
I wanted to sort of perhaps now piggyback on your suggestion. I think very important for us at the staff level is to know how wide the latitude is. On one extreme, we've got no exception, no waiver, or no extension, no waiver, versus yes, waiver. But in between a yes and a no, there's a lot of wiggle room to perhaps slightly modify the obligation so that at the end of the day, something that the employee is trained with what might be the equivalent of an otherwise annual or biannual live training responsibility. There are variations, some of which have actually been included in the requests that we've received from the hospitals, like, for example, there are variations that we can create so that we can maximize the likelihood of employees getting the necessary training as reasonably often as they can, without great sacrifice to the agency or sacrifice to the statewide obligation for that training to take place in the first place. So that's where I think your assistance and our look to you for guidance on how wide the latitude is, what the parameters are of staff's authority, delegated authority to sort of decide and dispose of some of these requests that have come in.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. From our internal discussions generally on the subject, there's not an inclination on our part to dispense with all training, but rather to assess whether some form of accommodation or adjustment is in order. But having said that, there may be instances go beyond. But we'll come back with a proposed amendment to the television authority.
Commissioner Groenewald wanted to speak.
I just wanted to echo what I just heard the executive director say, which was, I thought, Commissioner James's recommendation that staff come back to us with conceptual framework, and then we have something to focus on and discuss. So I guess that's been decided. Yes.
Commissioner Caravano.
Two questions. Number one is, what are we doing, what do we do now with like the collective bargaining agreement issue?
That's an issue also, I believe, for at least some of these institutions. They have union bargaining issues that where they don't have, they lack some discretion to alter their employees' schedules.
So if there's nothing we're doing, it's just now the agency is dealing with it.
That's totally out of our hands.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we're in discussions with one principal body addressing that issue.
Okay.
There's some ideas that have been.
Right, some ideas have been put forward, and we're considering them, and we've considered a couple of other options as well.
But that's where I think Claudia's point about sort of the spillover effect
Yeah,
has to be taken, because if you
absolutely.
make an exception for one based on collective bargaining, that could be 50,000 employees or 100,000 employees.
That certainly wouldn't be a basis for waiving entirely. But we'd wait and see how we would handle that.
Well, in the public employment area, we might have a legislative initiative that would address that in some way. Perhaps we send that to the legislation committee, but I think that's very premature at this point. I think first we need to get an idea of what parameters we have to define and deal with before we can do anything else.
It's fair to recognize that, a lot of these situations were unforeseen when the legislature created a very broad mandate. And it doesn't neatly fit every single person within the state who's subject to it.
Clearly, we're not dealing in a one-size-fits-all atmosphere.
My second question is, so the part-time employees or seasonal employees, isn't it like after a certain amount of time you're supposed to take the trainings, or I don't know how it affects seasonal employees?
No, I think they're required, just like any other employee, they're required to take it for the first time
within X
Then
amount.
it's amount of time.
It's just what, like 3 months or?
I think so. I'm not
And
sure.
so these seasonal employees are longer than
The obligation applies to them the same way as it applies to anyone else at this time.
if the seasonal employment exceeds 3 months, you're saying. And then my third question is it, we're talking about live classes, or can you just do on demand for these people who are in this category?
That's a potential modification.
Okay, because then you can do it whenever, you don't have to take out a block of time. So just thank you.
Sure, that's an option.
All right, any questions, comments further?
When you share the requests with us,
Sure.
so we get a sense of what they're.
Oh, yes.
Is there anybody on the committee for being for?
This issue came up, get it on the education report as one of the challenges they were facing.
Right.
It's like, so I think it is, actually, they're addressing it. I think they're already addressed, at least they're recognizing it. They spoke about it and worked on ways in which it should be resolved. So I think it's there.
That's all we'll do.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's come up and it's been an issue that's been in for a while.
All right, so Michael, if we can come up with something and we'll go from there.
We'll work on it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. If you have any ideas or parameters that you would suggest should be considered, get in touch with Michael and we'll thrash through it. All right. I think that's the end of our agenda. Is there any other new or other business?
So how was that resolved? Please come back.
All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Commissioner Caraballo, seconded by Commissioner Edwards. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. With thanks to the commissioners, this has been a tough health week or two to weather the storm and to come in. I really appreciate staff. As always, excellent aid to us. Thank you. And have a good one. Next month, the meeting will also be in New York City. We skipped Albany, but we're going to stay with our regular schedule and not jockey it around anymore. So next month, we're back here in New York. Stay well all.